Let's talk about the JavaScript console in your browser and some of the operators that you can use in JavaScript. So I've created this repository at GitHub that I'll throw the link in the video notes, but we're going to go ahead and use that as our guide as we walk through just a few basics. So first of all, we need to open up our JavaScript console. And if you're not sure how to use that, it's part of your developer tools, which in Google Chrome, I've included a link here that shows you how to open up those developer tools and some of the things you can do with them. If you're using Safari or Firefox, it's very similar. Just look up what you need to do in order to turn that on or to open it. For Chrome, what we can do is just right click anywhere on the page and click on Inspect, and that launches our developer tools. And you can see there's a lot of different tabs that are available, some that have been added because of plugins that I've added to the browser, and some that are just here by default. And we want to click on the one called Console. Once you've clicked on that, you'll see you have a command prompt that you probably are familiar with from your terminal or your command line or your console, whatever you want to call it, on your actual computer. And that's one of the great things about JavaScript is that it's built into most browsers at this point in time and is available as part of them in the developer tools like this. So this allows us to write JavaScript directly in the browser. And this can even interact with the page if you wanted to as kind of a test run as you're developing your application. Right now, we're just going to try a few basic functions to see how they work. So let's start with this alert example. If we type alert, this is a function that is included in JavaScript, and that function for alert expects some form of string or value that it's going to display. So it's looking for an argument to be passed in. So let's go ahead and use a string hello world as our argument, and we're going to go ahead and end that line with a semicolon. And once I hit enter, you can see that an alert popped up, and it has that string that I passed in as an argument. And the only thing we can do now is click OK. I can't click on the page anymore. The alert basically blocks all movement until the user clicks OK. Once I click OK, you'll notice down here in my console that it returned a value, undefined. And that's because the alert doesn't actually have anything to return back to me as a program, as a developer. So it's just giving me undefined because there is nothing of value for it to give back. The next example we're going to look at is a confirm. So we're going to go ahead and do something very similar, pass in an argument, hit enter, and you'll see that this is very similar to an alert, but instead of just OK, we also now have a cancel button. So if I click cancel, you'll see my return value that it provides back to me is false. And if I were to hit OK instead, you can see that my return value is true. So now we have two different options for the user to click, and we know what they've clicked based on what's returned from that function. So this is what allows us to then determine what the next action might be in our program. We've got another one called prompt. And don't worry about this line break here. We can type this all as one big line. And this is very similar to the confirm in that it has the cancel and OK, but it also has an input field. Now, if the user clicks on cancel, our return value is null. So what it's trying to do with a prompt is it wants to return a value given by the user, but because the user clicked cancel, it's giving us null. It's not giving us false though. Let's go ahead and see what happens if the user clicks OK. This time, what we receive is an empty string, and we can tell it's a string because of these quotation marks, and there's nothing in between them, so that's an empty string. So this now is a value. It doesn't have any information in it other than it's an empty string. So we know this way, if the user clicks cancel, we're going to get null. If they click OK without typing anything, we get an empty string. And then finally, if they do type something and click OK, we actually get the string that they typed in. So there's 3 different things that could be handled in a prompt, and we can base our reaction to that input or whatever they've clicked on by whatever return value we receive. So we know how to determine if they've hit cancel, didn't type anything, or did type something. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and do some math to explore the operators a little bit. So to clear your console, there's this button here. Let's click on that. And that gives us a clear space to work with. And let's do some basic math. So this is going to be just like what you would be familiar with on a calculator. And it doesn't matter if you type spaces or not. Those are just to make it more readable. It's a readability thing. Now, if you also remember from using a calculator or doing math, there's an order of operations, which means if numbers are being divided or multiplied, that action happens before using addition or subtraction. So in this particular example, 3 plus 5 times 2, that 5 times 2 is going to be calculated first, giving us 10, and then the 3 is added, giving us 13. If we did some parentheses around it, we'll have the 3 plus 5 happening first, so that's 8 times 2, giving us 16. So just like what you're used to in a calculator. Now, this has all been in the JavaScript console in our browser. Let's see what happens if we actually use a file, which is much closer to what you would do in an actual application. So if we scroll to the top of this repository and click on the green clone or download button, there are a few different ways you can get the files that I've prepared for us. If you have GitHub Desktop already installed, click on that. Or if you want to just download the zip with the files in it, you can click that. Or if you want to use your terminal, which is what I'm going to do, click on Copy to Clipboard, head over to your terminal, and type git clone, paste that in, and that will clone it down for you. Once it's cloned, you do have to navigate into that directory, so type cd for change directory, and then the name of the directory. Hit enter. And now we're inside of what we just cloned down. And if you type ls, you'll list out the different files that are available in this directory. So we have our readme.md, which is what we were actually viewing on GitHub. It's a nice way to view a text file. And then we have our index.html and script.js file. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up Atom so that I can view these files a little easier. Once Atom has launched, I'm actually going to go ahead and move it into the same desktop as my browser to make it a little easier to view it all at once. And the file we're going to be looking at in the browser is index.html. And the easiest way to view that in your browser is click on Show Finder when you right-click on that index.html, and then you can just double-click on that file, and that's going to launch it in your browser. And you can see the file path up in the URL. So you know this is the local copy because it's using file as that first part of the URL. Now in this file, we have basically the same content that's in the README that we were viewing on GitHub, but the reason we're using this HTML file now is because with HTML we're able to import JavaScript files. And so we've imported in this particular one, script.js, which is another file in the same directory, and this is containing JavaScript code in here. So I'm going to go ahead and close my tree view, and we're just going to look at this JavaScript file. And let's open up our inspector as well and switch to the console. And really we don't care about anything in this HTML file. This is all stuff that we've already done in the earlier exercises, so let's just make this console most of our screen. Now you can see that right now nothing is in our console, but we're going to use a feature called console.log, which allows us to take information and output it into the console. And this file is going to be run whenever this page is loaded because it's being imported into the page with that script tag that we had in the bottom of that index.html file. So in this file, we have two different ways of commenting out JavaScript, and this is for JavaScript in general. You can comment out a chunk of text or a chunk of code with a / and an asterisk at the very beginning, and end the comment with an asterisk and a / at the very end, which in this particular example, I have extra asterisks in here just to make it easy to see a section header. Here you can see a little bit of a different example. The only part that's really required to make this a comment is this end asterisk with a / and this beginning asterisk with a /. These extra asterisks here are all just for styling to make it a little bit more readable. The other way you can comment out code is just with 2 /, and that's what we're going to be doing to comment and uncomment these example bits that I've already included in this exercise. And anything with an asterisk, that will denote that it's a comment that helps guide us along the way. So we only want to uncomment these sections. So let's go ahead and uncomment our first line of code. And in Atom, you can do command and /, that's the shortcut, but otherwise you can just delete that little bit. Now you see in the top of my window here, I've got a little blue dot, and that's showing me that my file is unsaved. So the change I just made has not been recorded in this file. So I'm going to do Command S to save this file. And then in order for me to see the code run, because I've just uncommented this bit and saved it, I need to actually reload my page so that it repulls that script.js file. And I can do that by either clicking on this icon here or using Command R, which is what I'll be using. Once I did Command R, you saw that this string showed up in my console. And in the console, it shows that file that it's coming from and the line in that file. So you can see the 10 and the 10. Now that we understand how the console works and how we can log to it from a JavaScript file, we can start to do some fun stuff with that. So the math that we were doing earlier, we can also output to the console, and we can provide values into the console, and it's going to output the final value. So if I hit reload, 3 + 5 is showing me just an 8. So it's not showing me the equation, it's just showing the result of that equation. Or if I were to do 2 × 5, remember, I've got to save my file, reload the page, I can see 10. Or I can also do a string. Now, we know how to output things into our console. Let's go ahead and try using a variable and see how that can store a value. So a variable is defined using var and then naming it whatever you want. And it has to start with a letter, but it can be a name that has letters or numbers in it. So we're going to just call this my number, and we're going to assign it a value using the equal operator. And then let's go ahead and output that to our console using console.log. And we're outputting a string just to help with our debugging, so we know exactly what it is we're looking at. And then we're giving it the actual variable here so we can see its value. And then let's reload the page. So here's just our label, and then this is the actual value. And you can even see that in my console, numbers have a little bit of a bluish tint, whereas strings are just in black text. So even in my developer tools, it's helping me determine what's an actual number versus a string. Now we can take the same variable that's already been defined above, so it's defined using this var, and we can reassign it using this equal operator, and we can even reassign it using its original self. So we're taking its original value, which is 1, and we're multiplying it by the number 2. And then we're reassigning it back to itself. So we get a new value by doing that. And let's go ahead and reassign it again, just to start to understand how that works. So each time I'm just reassigning it, but I'm doing things to it. So my value for this variable can vary based on whatever actions happen to it during the course of the program. Now, similarly to how I was just adding numbers to itself, we can also do shorthand by having this plus equals operator. So what this is doing is this is actually doing the same thing as my number equals my number plus 5. That's the exact same thing happening there. So right now, its value is 10. When I run it again, it's going to be 15, because what it's doing is it's taking that 5 and adding it to itself and reassigning its value. You can do the same thing with subtraction. And you can even do operators and variable assignment with strings. So we actually don't even need this var here because we've already defined it above here. So if we set my string to high and output it, and then use this addition operator, we can add to the string. So you can see I originally had just a short string, which was high, and it does have a space there. And then we added more to the string. So even though it's a string, you can still add to it. Now in ES6, we have a few more ways to designate a variable, and those are called let and const. Now let behaves very similarly to var in that you can assign a variable using let. So here this one is a let, and its value is huzzah, and then I can reassign that value by adding or changing it somehow. But if I want to have something that remains constant that cannot change, instead of using let, we can use const. And what that does is it's something that is no longer mutable. So if there's something that we want to make sure does not get changed, even on accident somehow, we can set it as a const so that we know for sure that we're not making changes to it. So if I try to make a change by assigning it to a new value, my browser should give me an error. And there's my error, assignment to a constant variable, and it gives me the line and the file that I can find that in. Now if instead I had changed this to let, and then let's go ahead and output it, our error went away, we can see that it was able to reassign it. But if I change it back to const, we are ensuring that this value can't be changed. So those are just a few different things to be aware of and how to use the console in your browser.